welcome back to my channel, or for those that are new here, hello, my name is Alicia. So in today's video we're going to be doing episode 8 of my calf rearing series, and it's going to be all about the differences between casein based milk powder and whey based milk powder. So we're going to be looking at both the advantages and disadvantages of both these kinds of milk powders and how we use both of them when we're rearing our calves. Not just for optimum growth but also economical purposes as well. So I know that it can be really confusing when you see so many different brands of milk powders out there for all sorts of prices, but there is a major difference between the casein based and whey based powders. So by the end of this video you'll have much more of a better understanding of what's in the powders and how they both work in the calf digestive system. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. I will be making a lot more of these episodes to help you guys out with your calf rearing. So let's get into this video. Before I jump into it, when I am saying casein based, I'm just referring to the premium based milk powder, because you've got a premium base, that one that's normally around $100, and then you've got that whey based option. So yeah, when I say casein based, I'm pretty much talking about those premium, more expensive powders. Alright, so if you're going to get anything out of this video, the most important thing to know between the two is the casein based powder is a curding milk powder and the whey powder is a non-curding milk powder. So calves that are 4 days to 4 weeks old need a milk powder that curds, so they need a casein based milk powder. So the reason why you want a curding milk powder is to obviously reduce scours. Now because this kind of milk curds in the calf's stomach, it just means that it doesn't go straight through the calf, which means it takes a lot longer to digest, which keeps the calf fuller for longer, because we know young calves don't eat a lot of meal and grass, so you want a milk powder that takes longer to digest. Casein based powders also have a lot higher protein and fat content. That's because when you are feeding your calves whey powder, you end up supplementing them with more protein in the form of pellets. So casein based powder or premium powder is definitely a lot more dearer than whey based powder, but it is seriously definitely worth spending the extra money and feeding your calves a premium milk powder for the first 4 weeks. So I have once tried starting my calves on whey at a younger age, and it definitely stunts the growth and they definitely don't grow as great as when I've started them on the premium based powder. So yeah, I definitely do not recommend starting calves on whey powder, because you definitely can tell that they have been like undernourished. In my experience, a poorly started calf never does well, never grows into a decent animal. So it's pretty much within your best interest to spend the time and a bit of extra money and make sure you're feeding those calves that premium milk powder and giving them a good head start. So I'm not saying that whey powder is bad. Whey powder definitely has its place when you're rearing your calves. So we will swap over to whey powder when the calves are around 4 to 6 weeks old. It just kind of depends on how they've gone up into that point. So the reason why you want to switch to whey powder is because it is a non-curding milk powder, like I mentioned before. So because it doesn't curd in the stomach, it's digested a lot quicker, which allows the calves to be a lot more hungry in the afternoon, which obviously makes them get into their meal and start eating their grass, which is essential into developing the rumen and then being able to wean them off that milk a lot quicker. Now I'm not going to go into detail too much about calf stomachs and that kind of thing, but pretty much a calf when it's young has a small rumen and a big abomasum. So pretty much what you want to do is by the time they're weaned, you want that rumen to develop and get bigger and that abomasum to get smaller. So what I used to notice when I fed my calves on premium milk powder, that casein based milk powder right through, I'll notice that my older calves were always getting bloat. So they say this is called abomasumal, or however you say it, bloat, because obviously that abomasum is shrinking and the rumen's getting bigger. If you've got that curding milk powder that's in that abomasum, then that can lead to bloat and all sorts of issues. Also because the premium casein based powder is a higher protein level, because you're giving your calves meal and grass and everything which has a high protein content in it, that means your calves can technically get too much protein, and then that can also lead to a lot of issues as well. So yeah, I hope I haven't confused anyone, because it can become quite a headache to try and understand how it all kind of works. But I'm pretty much essentially just saying Sometimes feeding them the premium powder right through can actually be more harmful than good, because that's what we used to do, and it can have issues on its own. So that's why I definitely do recommend switching them to whey powder from 4 to 6 weeks old, just to eliminate some of those problems. So with the digestion, whey milk powder is digested in about 2 to 3 hours compared to the premium based casein powder, which takes 6 to 8 hours to digest. So you can imagine if you're feeding your older calves that casein based powder and it's taking that long to digest, they're just not going to be hungry and not get into the grass and meal like they should. And if they don't get into that, then obviously their rumen's not going to develop, they're not going to put on the weight, and they need to get to that 100 kgs to be weaned. Because it's digested a lot quicker, they're obviously not relying on the milk to keep them full, so they're eating a lot of meal and hay. So this really helps when you're weaning your calves, because they're not relying on that milk so much to keep them full throughout the day. So it essentially helps with post-weaning weight loss, because obviously the calves aren't relying on the milk to keep them full, and they have actually developed their rumen a lot better, and they're keeping themselves full on meal and grass. You shouldn't come into issues of that post-weaning weight loss. When I did put them on premium milk powder right the way through, I did notice that sometimes when I cut them off the milk, for that week or 2 weeks after, they would kind of like not look that great. They'd have a bit sunken tummies, because obviously their rumen hasn't developed that great. So I've definitely noticed a big difference when I've switched them onto the whey milk powder, that when I wean them it's a lot easier. A couple of days after weaning I'll go and check them and they're all still got full tummies, they're happy, they're not mooing away. And I mean, why wouldn't you switch to whey? It is a lot cheaper than premium milk powder, so that is definitely a big plus as well. So the two powders, in my opinion, do look and smell and mix completely different. I can definitely tell when it's a whey powder or a premium powder. So whey powders are also a lot more yellow in colour, and I can't explain the consistency, but they don't mix as well, I don't think, in my opinion, and they definitely smell more like fake, if that makes sense. Like the premium milk powder definitely has that nice milk smell, and then when you open up and mix that whey powder, it definitely has a different smell to it. So you can definitely tell that it's not like as good of a quality as the premium milk powder would be. So pretty much to sum it up, we put our calves, as soon as we get them on 4 days old, straight onto premium casein based powder for around 4 to 6 weeks. Then we'll switch them onto whey based milk powder. So just make sure when you're switching them from the premium to the whey that you're gradually doing this. Don't just one day stop feeding them the premium milk powder and then just start feeding them whey. You've got to gradually lessen the premium based powder and then up the whey, you know, just so they don't get scours, because calves are very sensitive to dietary changes. So yeah, you just got to make sure that you introduce the whey milk powder slowly. Of course, if you've been watching a few of my other episodes, you know that we feed our calves whole milk as well, but we still do this premium and whey milk powder as well. So like I mentioned in those videos, we feed our calves about 1/3 of a bucket of milk powder and 2/3 whole milk when we have whole milk available. We will switch to the whey powder when the calves turn 4 to 6 weeks old. So at the start we'll do that 1/3 of premium based powder topped up with whole milk, and then when they get to 4 to 6 weeks old we'll switch it to that 1/3 of whey milk powder with the whole milk. So when we're transitioning, it is pretty easy because we have a consistency with the whole milk. So sometimes we can actually just switch to whey milk powder because they're used to having 2/3 of a bucket of whole milk. So it's not that much of a change when we switch over. Now I can't really help you when it comes to brands. I mean, I generally tend to stick to the brands that I know. So generally I use a brand called whey. I think it's an amazing powder. This year I went with Milligan's premium based powder, and then a new one which I haven't tried before called Powerway from Reliance, and that has actually been a really good whey powder. One year I bought this cheap stuff from the Mount Maunganui, I think, and I can't remember what it was called, but it was so bad. So there's definitely some bad milk powders out there, I reckon, because the calves did terrible, they looked bad. It just smelled off, it didn't mix, it was just, yeah, it wasn't good. So I do think try and stick to those reputable brands, like definitely the ones that Farmlands and Farm Source stock, because I do think some of the ones that you see advertised that are really cheap, I don't think they're the best. But obviously I can't talk for all brands because I haven't tried them all, so I can't say like don't use that milk powder or whatever. But in my experience, yeah, I can't remember what it's called. If I think of it, I'll put it in the description below what the milk powder was that I didn't like. But from now on I'm just sticking to the ones that the stores get in for me because I know that they're, yeah, like a reputable brand. But yeah, if you're thinking of getting a whey powder, I do recommend this one, and the calves have been doing really good off it. So if you're looking for a whey powder, I do recommend that Power Whey from Alliance. But all the years before this I've always used whey, and I highly recommend those guys. That is generally my go-to company when I get milk powder. So here's a bit of a close-up of what milk powders we use. So here's our Milligan's Premium Milk Powder. And then here's our Reliance Power Whey. But yeah, just experiment. I mean, you're never going to know what the powder's like until you try it. And definitely let me know in the comments below if you know any milk powder brands out there that aren't quite common that are really good. I'm sure everyone else would like to hear your experiences with those different kinds of powders. I sure am interested to know if those cheaper ones that I see advertised through Facebook and that are actually good, and how your calves grow and do on it. Alright, so I'm going to wrap up this episode here. I hope everyone now has a little bit more of an understanding between the two different milk powders, but it's pretty simple. Pretty much one's a curding milk powder and one's a non-curding milk powder. That's pretty much the basics of it. Just understanding how the curding and non-curding works in a calf digestive system. So I highly recommend getting a Casein premium based powder for your calves 4 days to 4 weeks old, and then switch to a whey powder once they hit a minimum of 4 weeks old right through to weaning. Yeah, this system is not only great for optimum calf growth but also for economical purposes as well, because we know that whey based milk powder is a lot cheaper than premium milk powder. I hope everyone enjoyed today's episode. Definitely subscribe if you haven't already to keep following my calf rearing series. I'm going to do episode 9 very soon. I've got a lot of footage sitting there on my camera, and it's going to be all about the weaning process. So we've been vaccinating and drenching the calves. I'll also show you our True Test scanner, what we use to read the calf's ear tags, because that's pretty cool. Yeah, you. It was that one. Until then, I hope everyone's doing well, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.